The Music Retail Show.
All right, man, we are here and we are going to do another great episode. Actually, we're going to talk about a previous episode because we got a lot of great things to talk about.
Yeah.
But
I feel like I have a book right here because I wrote a lot of notes and we have a lot to go over. So, yeah, I mean,
we do have a lot to go over. But you know what? We always take a little time to catch up and stuff like that. So, hey, I feel like maybe we should do that.
Yes, let's talk about something that we talk about a lot this time of the year, and that's gardening. Out at my property that I have, because I probably won't do a formal garden this year, and if I do, it'll be small.
Yeah.
But I always do this, and I got to stop doing this, but I always do it, and that's want to plant more trees. And so I think, and I'm not positive.
At your house?
No, out at my property.
Oh, property, okay.
So I'm not positive, but I got to get an auger because I'm building a fence out there.
Yeah.
And a post hole, to dig the post hole or the holes for the posts.
Yeah.
And I think I'm going to get a bunch of blueberry bushes and maybe some grapes, and I'm just going to line it up.
Line it up.
I have a feeling I'm going to probably do like
you can't have
40
too
or
many.
50 of them.
Yeah, and you know what? What's a bummer is obviously this morning it was like 18 degrees this morning.
It was so cold.
And I started the blooms on my peach trees started coming out, and I'm sure they are just obliterated.
Well, maybe they'll rebloom.
That's what happened last year.
Yeah, mine does
trees.
the same thing. Maybe they'll rebloom.
So Hannah wanted to put these, like my one peach tree is tall. Like it's pretty tall.
Yeah.
It's probably a good 14 feet, the tip of it.
Yeah.
And the trunk is pretty thick. But man, I was just like, I don't know, man. I just think sometimes we just live in that place in the United States where some years you win, some years you lose.
Yeah, it's hard for peaches.
So, and even apples and stuff, I guess they're maybe even a little bit more resilient.
Yeah.
But man, it's a bummer. I want
they
peaches.
like cold weather. Apples are actually good. Up in Michigan, Wisconsin, up there, there's a lot of good apple orchards. So we should be fine with that. I don't know.
So you're going to do it? You're not going to do a big garden this year?
I don't think so. What about you?
Man, we scaled back, and we're going to do our garden a little bit smaller, but a little bit more purposeful. In fact, actually, we just placed a order for seeds about less than a week ago. So
that's one of the funnest things to do is order seeds. I love doing it.
And, we've got our kids involved. Graham and Jackson, Audrey all have their little spots where they want to make gardens. Jackson, all he wants to do is grow tomatoes. He wants to grow like a bush of tomatoes. That's all it is.
Hey.
And that's what he does. And it's
Good
amazing. You always hear about like, hey, give your plants some space so they can grow and breathe and everything. He just like jumbles them all together and has like 9 plants growing within 3 square feet.
That's a lot. Yeah.
And then there's a ton of tomatoes that come out.
Let's talk about that because I think it was your dad, and you could correct me if I'm wrong. A handful of years ago, I believe you were talking about your dad actually plants things closer than what they recommend.
Yeah.
And I did that.
The square foot gardening.
Yeah.
Where everything's is like literally within inches of itself. Yeah.
And I tell you what, I don't think I think it's awesome. I think they grow just as well. You get a lot more productivity with it. You can plant more in the space that you have. So I don't know. I started doing that. So.
Well, I hope this year really turns out. We spent a lot of year trying to make our soil right and everything like that. So I hope it's a good year. But speaking of productivity,
you're getting serious on us.
I know it's time to get serious. Hey, of course, the last episode that came out, we spoke with Tim Kletti, and we thought it was very important. In fact, I was getting feedback from some of my clients that they listened or watched the video and thought, okay, that is just some stuff I needed to hear.
Good.
And so when you said you wanted to do this episode, like talking about, hey, let's break down some of the things he said, I think this is good. So, because this is the kind of stuff where people can get down to the meat and potatoes of why are they doing business and how can they figure that out.
I agree with it. I've actually gone back and listened to it at least 2 times, 2 more times. Yeah. Now, I've listened to bits and pieces of it, but actually from start to finish at least 2 more times. So I've made a lot of notes. Yeah. Probably too many notes. Of course, we won't get through it all, but there is some high spots that we will hit. And I think it'll be awesome.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, man, so let's jump right in. So one of the big highlights of what Tim said was he was talking about the SWOT analysis, or how to analyze your business. And of course, SWOT stands for strength, weakness, opportunity, and threats.
Correct.
So when he was talking about that, I'm sitting there going, oh, okay, how many of the business owners that either listen to this or that we work at, how many do you think dive in that deep where they're analyzing their business as far as
I don't think
economical
enough
structure?
Yeah, I don't think enough. I think a lot of times people, they open up their doors and they wait for people to come in. I mean, they're not sitting there and breaking down their strengths and their weaknesses, because a lot of times they don't want to talk about their weaknesses.
Yeah.
And a lot of times they don't look at their strengths and actually build on them.
Yeah.
So.
What are some?
Excuse me, I've got something in my throat, man. I'm coughing.
What are some strengths and weaknesses that you think that stores need to, or store owners need to be honest with themselves about?
Whew, man,
that's a tough question. I realize
there's a lot there. I think everybody's into. There's so many different people. A lot of times their strengths could be views as inventory. It could be staff. It could be your personal personality. It could be your business sense. So there's a lot of different things there, and so it's kind of hard to nail down. I think a lot of times when I see strengths in people, I think a lot of times it's their endurance. It's like a race. Yeah. Their endurance to get to the end of the race, and they're always on task. They're always, I've said before that I could talk to somebody on the phone and with minutes know how successful they are.
Yeah.
Not that they tell me how successful they are. It's just their attitude.
Yeah.
It's the way they're talking about things, how they execute things. It's really amazing. And I guess on the other side, you can do the same with as far as weaknesses. Sometimes I listen to people and I'm like, oh my goodness, these guys. And sometimes with us and what we do, I make the choice not to even open them up as a dealer because, quite frankly, I don't want to take people's money. I mean, there's no value in it. There's no win in it. So that I would say that is easy to identify as people's weaknesses.
Yeah, and you think that Tim, or not even just Tim, but this analysis approach, you think it's talking about the fact that people need to go, listen, you know what? I'm a people person. A lot of my strengths are the fact that I can get with people and I can sell them musical instruments, but you know what? I can't stand doing bookkeeping. That's a weakness. I need to figure out how to approach that weakness. Maybe they need to outsource something or hire the right person.
Yeah, that's the key right there.
We're sitting here trying to analyze this approach?
Well, I agree with that. I mean, we do have to know our strengths, and we do have to realize what we're good at and what we're not good at. And we have to hire around us, and I think that's a big part. I think you mentioned it right there. Some people, they don't want to do the books, they don't want to do that backroom business kind of stuff. Yeah. They want to be on the floor where all the action's at. Well, then you got to hire somebody that is an accountant, or a lot of times in marriage, there's one of the people in the marriage is really good at it, and the other one's not so good about it.
Sure,
and it's sometimes the wrong person is doing the books.
Yeah.
Well, it's the same in business. I mean, I would probably be that guy.
Yeah.
Now I want to overlook things, and I know how to do a lot of things, but actually doing it, I would probably hire someone to do that.
Yeah, and I would think that obviously assessing SWOT, SWOT, if you gotta figure out what your strengths and your weaknesses are within your business if you're ever going to get to the point where you can determine opportunities to jump on or threats that you need to get rid of.
Well, I think when we're talking about SWOT, I mean, when I look down at that, and this is my personality, I don't. I even almost skip over strengths and weakness and go straight to opportunity.
So you think that determines what your strengths might be?
Well, for me, it kind of all works together. But for me, it's just, again, it's a personality type. Then that could be part of my weakness too.
Yeah.
Is I automatically go opportunity. Give me opportunity, and I will use my talents, my skills, whatever I have to make something happen.
Yeah.
And we have to have opportunity. We have to look and say, what is the opportunity that I have in my marketplace, and how can I make that my strengths? And a lot of times, how can I I identify those and know that they are my weakness and what I'm going to do about it. Am I going to hire people? Am I going to educate myself? There's a lot of keys with that. So for me, again, I'm looking down at this and it has SWOT, but my eyes go straight for O for opportunity.
Yeah, and actually, I noticed that when I was looking at it a little bit, that they actually, I believe that it's SWOT because that analysis, you approach it from that direction, that there's actually other ones where you switch them around and it's like TW or OT, SW. So like, somebody might go, hey, I've determined I've got an opportunity in this market. Yeah. And they might determine whether they're in business or what their point is. And then they say, well, what's my threat of that opportunity? Well, hey, here's an opportunity I can jump on. Then they might determine, like you're saying, hey, here's my strength of why I can take advantage of this opportunity.
Yeah.
So
I think it's all good. I mean, because again, for me, they say your strengths become your weakness, and I think that ties in. But a lot of times what we don't do is sit down there and be honest with ourselves and go, I need to actually figure out what my weaknesses are. Yeah. And sit down and make a grid and write down your strengths, write down your weakness, write down your opportunity, also your threats. I mean, that's something that's easily overlooked. I would overlook that. Yeah. What is my threat in my marketplace? Yeah. Is somebody out there doing something way better than I am and I'm missing the boat? Am I not taking advantage of something that I should be, going back to the opportunity? Yeah. And for that, I honestly need to sit down, make a grid, write it all out, and so I could sit there from the outside and look in and actually see what that is. And a lot of times it might be helpful to have somebody else do that with you or for you.
Yeah, and I guess that would be the big difference for people who are joining in on this conversation, that weaknesses would be more about your approach to business. What can you bring as strengths? What would be your weaknesses? Threats would be maybe what are some of the outside things that maybe you can or can't control, like location or ordinances or franchises or all those kind of things that you have to assess if the opportunity is actually a good opportunity.
Correct.
So, so I thought that was good. I'm hoping we can bring Tim on and maybe he
Scott,
can, or even Scott and talk about, the business and a little bit of analysis even from that. And it sounded like maybe even had a couple other approaches that maybe they used, but that was one that he had mentioned. So
I liked it. Yeah. I liked it a lot.
The other thing I thought he talked about that was really good that you had wrote down on your notes was, that what makes music go round and even some of the other businesses under Winmark was about the fact that they concentrate on owning their inventory. This is a big deal.
Yeah, I'm glad he brought that up because, I've always been viewed a little odd because of the way I approach it, and that is to pay for it as you go, not to create all this debt. And the reason for that is personally in my life when I was younger, when the thought is if you get a credit card, wow, you're becoming an adult and you're becoming all this stuff. Yeah. And it's one of the biggest traps, and it's horrible. I had a huge amount of unsecured debt, and what that does to you is a shame. And so when I see businesses that operate on a cash basis, I see a lot of healthy businesses that can make healthy decisions. And when you're leveraged by either the manufacturer, your bank, your credit card, or whatever else, then you make decisions that are not always the most accurate decision. Yeah. He brought up owning your own inventory. Man, I am a huge fan of that.
Yeah, and he even gave a breakdown of that if they're buying stuff like people walking off the street, you're paying cash for that right off the street. And so they are now at a percentage where 80% of their store is used, 20% is other. Could be new, could be whatever. Yeah. And, but so they literally are owning 80% of their business, which he had contributed to the fact that makes them recession-proof or resilient to downturns.
Well, let's talk about the recession. I mean, what happens in a recession a lot of times, if you've got a huge amount of debt, you've got bills coming every single month, and you're paying manufacturers, you're doing all this, but there's not as many tickets being written up, and then you start running out of money.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
then and you have all this inventory that's not paid for. You can't make decisions that you would like to because it's not your inventory technically.
Yeah.
And you have to pay all these bills. And you talk about stress. You talk about making decisions that you normally wouldn't make. That's a great time to examine it. Now, if you own that inventory and it's paid for and a recession comes in, then all of a sudden you can turn that inventory into dollars. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's getting your money back. Sometimes it's not making as much margin.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's whatever because you have something that you can cash out on, and you have that opportunity. You don't have a bank knocking at your door, which a lot of times in recession leads to a lot of business failure. But if you own that inventory, your decision making is totally different.
Yeah, and the next category is talking about inventory levels, but I think there's a little bit of balance here. A lot of music stores will talk about the fact that, even I've heard it before, hey, do you do 30, 60, 90 terms? Because if you did, I could buy more from you. And I get it. They're sitting there going, I need more inventory, but I can't pay for it right now. Or my cash levels are only at a certain level. I don't want to deplete those just to get more stuff in the store. How do we approach this, and how do we balance this out as responsible business owners?
That's a tough thing, and man, I don't know how I want to address this without making everybody mad. But to be honest with you, someone that all they're doing is looking for those long-term terms so they can inflate their inventory. They're really not managing their inventory, and their focus isn't on the inventory that they have and the product that they own. It's on getting more.
Yeah.
And then a lot of times that's where we have a lot of inventory that sits, a lot of inventory that we're not being mindful of. And then we're not turning that product into dollars. We're just collecting, and I don't see where that works. I mean, even some of the big box stores that's in our industry, what does everybody talk about? They talk about their debt load. Mm-hmm. You talk about some of these companies that, hey, they're filing Chapter 11, and why is because of their debt load. I mean, very very few times do you ever hear of companies that have major issues and everything's paid for.
Yeah.
Everybody always talks about debt. I mean, there's a famous recording studio that I know the people that own it, and I think we all know who it is. I remember listening to employees that worked there. They were either engineers or whatever their job was, but they talked about all the time about all of the studio gear, everything in there, everything is paid for.
Yeah.
And they talked about how much relief was in the air because there wasn't all this debt. And they're like, no matter what, we've got jobs because we don't have a debt. As long as we're recording things, as long as we're bringing in money, everything's fine. And that was years and years ago, and it opened up my eyes to solidify the fact that that's the best way to do it. Because I've worked for 3 people in the MI industry. The first one, debt-free. All of his inventory was paid off. The second guy,
not free.
Not free. I left right before the sheriffs padlocked the door.
Yeah.
Third one, where I'm at right now, paid for.
Yeah.
And it's amazing the difference. I get a check every Friday. I don't have to worry about it being it'll bounce. The middle guy, when I went, I went to the bank every single week, and when I went to cash my check, now they couldn't tell me is there money in an account or not. I'd have to do little kind of signs. Do you like chocolate chip cookies? And they would say yes, and I go, okay, I need to cash my check. Yeah. And sometimes they were like, today I don't like chocolate chip cookies.
Yeah.
And then I would go back to work and go, there's no money in the account. And then they would go and run and deposit a little money. Then I'd go back to the bank. And man, that was a stressful way to do business, stressful as an employee. So man, owning your inventory, good for you, man. Yeah. Sometimes it slows you down a little bit. You think, man, I can't get all the stuff that I want, or I can't grow my business as fast as I want. But even if it takes you 20, 30% longer to get where you want to go, so what?
And that's the big deal. I think that's the big rub in all of this is that people have people have dreams and aspirations, and they want to build this business and build it into something that's going to be relevant. But, a lot of times most people don't have a bunch of cash just laying around that that they want to do that. So they're forced into making decisions of borrowing money and credit and taking on debt. So we're not saying that that's necessarily bad, because some people might need to take on some debt, but it needs to be in a responsible way, like the MGR's thing. Hey man, 80% of their inventory is used, and so they're paying for that. Now they might carry a little bit of debt. I don't know. He didn't say that, but I'm just speculating. They might carry a little bit of debt on with the rest, but that 80% of the inventory is paid for at any point in time. If they had to close the doors, they could sell it off and they could pay off anything that they owed.
Yeah.
So, but inventory levels, obviously, we just touched on. But the point of that is Tim talked about the idea of percentage versus dollars.
Correct.
Percentage. Both of them are important. But he made a statement that dollars pays the bills, percentages doesn't.
Yes.
So how do we want to approach that? What's the how do he said, hey, do you want to make 30% of $100 or 100% of nothing?
Yes.
These are kind of concepts that are thrown around. Let's talk about this a little bit and why this is important, that people need to understand they need to keep their inventory moving.
Well, I think a lot of times, and we've talked about this before, and I think all of the stuff that we're touching on and going over, a lot of us already know all this. We just kind of need to be reminded of it, and that's for myself all the time, and that's why I enjoyed the podcast so much that we did with him. But back on the inventory levels, that is a touchy subject with some people.
Yeah.
But the people that I find the most success in this business are the ones that are mindful of the inventory, because you can't sell it if you don't have it. You hear all these little things. You can't sell from an empty basket. You can't. There's all this stuff that goes on, and we all know that. But a lot of times customers walk into a music store and they're looking for a certain product, and you're out. Well, I'll back up. In Mart, the town that we live in, there was a grocery store, and I'll never forget. It was before we have Kroger's out here. Before the Kroger's moved in, there was a Food Lion, and I remember going, and I was going to go get milk, and they were out of milk, and I said, "You got to be kidding me!"
Yeah.
This is a grocery store, and I need milk. Exactly. A true story. I went back a second time later on to get milk. They were out of milk. And I was frustrated. I was furious, but it was the only grocery store in that area. And I'd have to drive, 10, 15 minutes to get to another one. And then I was like, you got to be kidding me. And I made up my mind right then, if I go back again and they don't have milk, I'll never walk into that store again.
Yeah.
So later on, true story, I walked in and I go, you've got to be kidding me. They were out of milk again. So that was probably 15 to 17 years ago.
So you think people feel that way?
I've never
with
been
music
in that
stores?
store again. And you know how many thousands of dollars that they lost on opportunity?
Oh, yeah.
Because of their stock levels were out? Same thing goes with music stores. You go there and you want to buy something as simple as strings. You walk in and go, hey, I want some D'Addario strings, some acoustic strings, and they're out.
Yeah.
And sometimes stuff happens, and then you go back again and you have the same experience. Before long, people are like, I'm not going back there.
Yeah.
They don't even have acoustic strings that I want.
Yeah.
And that's not even talking about guitars, because a lot of times you walk in there or basses or whatever you're looking for.
Yeah.
If you don't have the product, people go in there. That's the biggest disservice you can do, is have a customer walk in and you have stock outs. You don't have things that are supposed to be there that are there. They just walk out and guess what? They go buy it somewhere else.
Yeah.
They don't give you 3 times. I was being lazy and didn't want to drive into another town to get milk. But I've never walked back into that place. Never.
Yeah, no. I understand that because I live very close to that same Food Lion, so I know exactly what you're talking about. But at some point in time, though, in all of that, you have to be stocked. You have to be thinking of that. You got to be concerned about your inventory levels. But Tim wavered back and forth on what he thought between percentage and dollars. He goes, man, listen, I he said, hey, catch me at the end of the month.
They both have merit.
I want dollars. And you said, well, you can't be a hardliner on one or the other. You have to be in the middle. And he even said, it really depends on what's going on in the time of the month. And so we have to be smart business people that really kind of determine, kind of what you're going to do. Especially in a time of when, if you're in a downturn or things are not as good, cash flow might be really important, and percentage has kind of got to take a back seat a lot of times.
Yeah, I think that's very true, and it's I think going into it, what we in my opinion, what we need to go, I need about this much margin to keep the doors open, to pay the employees. I mean, it's real bills. It's real life that we have to understand. I mean, to have hard and fast rules on any of this is probably not the smartest thing you can do. But you still have to have margin to keep the doors open. That's an obvious. Sometimes you got to go, man, I need dollars, and I'll worry about margin tomorrow.
Yeah. That's exactly right. And, and maybe that's why, used used instruments and everything has become so popular because, and on the other aspect that is, hey, you got to kind of buy things right. Obviously, it's a little bit easier to buy used gear right because, you can turn around and have a little bit higher margin. So hopefully, if your business model incorporates a lot of used, your margins are technically going to be a little bit better. You're going to kind of get away with that.
I mean, that's the hope. I think some of it that we're not really talking about it much is the time of the year. I know for me, the summers were always real slow, and I hear that from a lot of different people. And so sometimes going into those summer months, and we've talked about this before, it's great to have your inventory paid off so you can make decisions with that inventory and to go, man, I've got to kind of cut the margin and just create cash. But if you owe on that, there's only so much. I'll never forget working for that middle guy that I was talking about. We had guitars on a floor plan. And, you talk about, it's like a credit card, it's like the credit card interest. And they came in once a month and inventory the product. Now, we had about $100,000.
What's a floor plan?
Floor plan is where they basically give you money to buy things and then you pay interest. And they come in and inventory it, and when you sell them, you got to pay them back.
Gotcha. Okay, almost like a bank is doing that, like a separate institution is doing that.
Yeah, kind of. Okay. It's horrible. It's horrible. Anybody that, in my opinion, is on a hard floor plans with a lot of these companies, oh man, it just scares the heck out of me.
It seems like they'd be running your business for you almost.
Well, yeah. But anyways, I got to keep some of my opinions to myself because then people will go, I'm not listening to that no more. But back to what I was talking about, it was very, very sad because they would walk in and we had a really high, a real popular acoustic line that was on a floor plan, and we had about $100,000 worth of inventory in there, and then every month they would come in. And then, man, you could just feel the tension because it was slow and money wasn't being managed right, and there was just a lot of negative. And then they would come in and go, "Yeah, you guys owe us, $12,585. I need a check." And it would just be like, God, and I would think in my head, how much of that is interest? Because we had floor planned a lot of this stuff, and who knows how long some of it was there, but we didn't manage it as well. I say we, it wasn't me. I had managers and general managers and all these people that were supposed to be really smart guys, but I look back on all that stuff and I was like, man, it was sad. So we didn't have $100,000. Maybe we had $30,000 or $50,000, but it was actually paid for. We wouldn't have to see those guys come in every month. We wouldn't have the stress. We wouldn't have to let deals walk because there wasn't enough margin. Because when you talk about the floor plan, the interest with all of that we owed and all that, we had to actually make decisions based upon the floor plan. And if we owned the product, well, it would take out a little bit of that we'd have to give to them, and we go, discount it, get it out of here. We need the cash. Totally different. different.
Yeah, no, and I get that, and that's obviously something that everybody has to consider. But obviously, inventory management within this, man, people need to determine whether it's a weakness or a strength, because it's a big deal. And some of the things you guys had talked about that you and Tim had kind of went back and forth on was obviously birthdays of instruments.
Oh,
man,
my God,
yes. And his deal is hey, once it's hit 30 days, we have to determine what the actual value of that instrument is.
Yeah, and that's very smart, and everybody has and it depends on, it just depends on your traffic, your size of your town, your inventory. I mean, everybody has to come up with. I know there was certain product when I worked retail, if it hit a birthday, oh my God, man, we did anything to get it out the door because we were embarrassed because it shouldn't have been there that long.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll never forget a really, really popular guitar player that I don't like his guitar playing, and
Kurt Cobain.
No,
I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Him either.
Ian didn't think that was funny.
Yeah, but anyways, so when his guitar hit a birthday, and it was like, I don't remember exactly. It was over $3,000. It was an expensive guitar. But when it hit his birthday, man, we were embarrassed because we didn't sell it. We pulled out the invoice and put the invoice on the guitar and said, buy it for...
This is what our cost is. You can buy it now.
This is what our cost is. Take this home.
Yeah.
And, a lot of people get mad about that. But the truth of the matter is we had to get rid of that product. We had so much money tied up in it. Look at all the turns that we didn't get because we overlooked it. I mean, this was out of our norm. We overlooked it. Shame on us because we should have sold that thing. We should have had at least 4 turns on that product.
Yes.
And once we didn't recognize that we can do that, then you discount it because it's not worth what we had it priced as.
Yeah.
If it was, we would have sold it. So obviously we have to discount it. And in the case of this, never order that piece again.
Yeah, and Tim used the phrase that he says at this point you're just paying rent on that product.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
which I think if people thought about it that way, which I'm sure a lot of people do, but if they just thought about the fact, thinking about turns, a lot of times people go, I need to hold on to this because I need to get out of this guitar what I think it's worth.
Yeah.
But they're not thinking about leveraging that money of going, take a little bit less, get that back, turn it, get that back, turn it, get that back, turn it. Now you've made 4 times, 5 times what you thought you were getting out of those dollars.
So a quick story, I'll never forget that the store that I worked at, number 2, who has since apologized for a lot of things that he said and done. But to be honest with you, it was a shame because we did a lot of money in business. That should have been one of the most successful stores in the Nashville area. We did between probably $15,000 and $20,000 a day in business. It was amazing the product that we moved. But anyways, so he bought a steel guitar. Like a double neck steel guitar, and he got it at the right price. And I don't remember exactly the numbers. I think he bought it for $300. And then so we had it in a location, and we moved locations. And when I started there, we moved to another location, and we took this steel guitar with us. And all the employees said he will not budge on the price. He has to get that price. We have tried to discount it. We've taken offers. Then no, he will not do it. So I was like, okay. And then I seen this thing set. We would wipe the dust off all the time. And then somebody came in there and offered us. I think we had it at $1,100. And again, my numbers might be a little bit off, but they're in that range.
Yeah.
And I think this guy offered us like $800, which I was like, heck yeah.
Done deal.
And I remember calling him because we had to call to get approval from this guy. And I said, man, I want to say his name. But I remember calling him and I go, hey, I've got a guy in here looking at this double neck steel guitar. He's got the money in his hands right now. It's a slow day. He's offering us $800. Oh my gosh. You talk about mad. Absolutely not. I'm not selling it for a penny less than I have it marked at. If I was, then I would lower the price myself. Yeah. And he went on and chewed me out about it. And I just remember on the phone going, this guy, he's just not a smart business guy.
Yeah.
We could have made $500 and got rid of something that was a complete anchor in our store. But he had to have a certain amount of margin.
Yeah.
And when I was gone, the pedal steel guitar was still there.
Yeah.
So he went out of business, and he still had the pedal steel guitar in his business.
And I'm sitting there trying to think through that logic. Like, no, he's holding on to it because he needs the money. Well, wait, if he needed the money, he would have bailed on it and took $500 for it just to turn it. So the logic, just I don't know.
There is no logic.
There's like I'm standing my ground, and I'm only going to win. But yeah. So yeah, I mean, I would think that.
I think it goes back to you think that a product is worth something, and if it was worth that, he would have sold it.
Yeah.
He would have sold it within the first 90 days.
Yeah.
But once you don't, then you got to go, okay, well, maybe I'm a little high on this.
Yeah.
Maybe I should accept trades against it. Maybe I should find out what the market will bear on it. Obviously, that price wasn't worth it.
Yeah.
In hindsight, he should have took $800 and ran.
Oh, absolutely. So, but the big day or the big takeaway on all of this is that. Tim's, their philosophy is man, okay, 30 days is our mark where we determine what the value is.
Yeah.
So, which maybe
for
music
some
stores,
that may be too quick.
Yeah.
Some it may not.
Maybe
but the key is to evaluate your aged inventory.
Yeah.
And see what is it worth in your market, and to turn that. You need X amount of turns. He brought up 4 turns per item per year. I agree with that a lot.
Yeah.
And in some cases, if it's priced right and you're in the right market, you could even do 6, 7, 8 turns.
Yeah, and that's the thing. A lot of their philosophy too is they want to make sure that they're showing new product to their customers. And I know a lot of music stores want to do that too as well. Everybody wants to do that. I remember there was a music store here in Nashville, and they sold a bunch of stuff. They sold a lot of used stuff, but man, you would walk into that place and you would see the same guitars hanging on the wall month after month after month. And it was a place that they sold consignment stuff, and so I'm sure they're hanging stuff, but that was before we had talked about too, where they had guitars that only had 5 strings on them, or like it had part of it had a locking tremolo, all the parts weren't even on it, and so there was a lot of issues there, but that is probably one of the greatest strengths that a music store could have, is to show that they've got new product for potential customers that are walking in their store.
Yeah, and I've talked about this before. Is even if you don't, maybe cash is a little bit tight. You still should move the inventory around. You should clean up your store. You should move a little bit of that. So the perception is you have a different inventory in your store.
Yeah.
So sometimes taking guitars and putting them in your back room for 30 days isn't a bad idea, and then bringing them back later. So moving inventory is something that as a store owner is got to be one of your biggest evaluations of your store is that inventory, because it's a lot of times we see things and we get used to seeing things and we're okay with it.
Yeah.
But as if we were a customer, that's how we need to view it.
Yeah.
Going, we've had this too long. This is a product that's not getting any looks. We need to discount it and get it out the door.
Yeah, and part of management too. I remember when Josh Touchton was talking to us about drums and cymbals. Inventory management to me also contains the idea of making sure your inventory is presentable. He was talking about, hey, go around, start dusting the cymbals off, thing, making sure everything looks good. And of course, that's part of all of that. If you want to turn stuff within 30 days,
it's got to be presentable.
Everything's got to be presentable. So
I agree.
Now the other big thing that I think Tim talked about is with inventory management is just-in-time ordering.
Yeah.
This is a big deal because, how many times have I gotten a phone call where somebody goes, hey, man, I need guitars really bad. I need to get this thing out the door so I can have them in my store by this weekend. Yeah,
I think a lot of times, and I don't know, for me, when I first heard about it was probably over 20 years ago working on the retail side, manufacturers were trying to do that.
Yeah.
And some manufacturers still try to do that. And they try to get product in the door, and they try to turn it around within X amount of days, because a lot of times they rent a warehouse space and they rent it for 4 days, 6 days, or whatever the math is. What's interesting is one manufacturer in particular back then used to do that, and today they do it kind of the same way. Now, what I hear, well, let me back up. When I was in the situation of buying the product, one of my biggest frustration was they were always out of product. It wasn't I couldn't sell the product, but items that I was looking for, they were always out because they were always bragging and going, man, we got this in and we got it out and we sold out already. And I'm like, well, that's awesome, but if your demand is there, you need to up your orders. And so I'd always get very, very frustrated with them. So that brand still does it today, and we can ask our customers, hey, how come you're not a dealer of this brand anymore? And they will say, you guys have more of that inventory than they do. They're always out. Come Christmas time, at a reasonable amount of time, not in December 15th, but, in October, I'm trying to stock my store with stuff, and they're already out of inventory, and they don't know when they're going to get more in.
Yeah.
And so I get frustrated. I can't get their product in stock, so I'm just not going to carry it anymore. And so that started with the manufacturers, and it's trickled down to a lot of the stores.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, in my opinion, it's stores that really don't have the money to be in business, but they choose to be in business, or they're growing or trying to grow too fast where they have so many SKUs that they can't keep up with it. Again, it's almost like, I feel that a lot of these guys need to probably have 20% less brands that they carry, but stock more of those brands.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times they run out, or they're on credit hold, or there's something financially going on. But their whole goal is like, I want to be franchised for 10 guitar companies. And realistically, they should be 4 or 5.
Yeah. Well, let me see. And it is a problem because obviously just-in-time ordering is more of a knee-jerk reaction. It means you're not managing your inventory correctly. You should be forecasting, looking down the road, realizing that hey, somebody will call me up and they've got 10 of them in stock. And they'll go, hey, I need some more of those guitars. I sold 5 of those.
Yeah.
And instead of getting down to 9, they sold 9, I got 1 left. Well, I better order it. They're ordering them when they have 5. This is important because obviously, you're keeping the flow of inventory going, and, the just-in-time ordering, it can be detrimental to your business.
Well, I mean, one of my biggest frustrations, I'm not even talking about guitars or musical instruments. I'm talking about going to a Home Depot or anywhere where you go in there and you're looking at stuff, and then they have a thing there going out of stock.
Yeah.
It is so frustrating. You drive down to get something that's cookie cutter. It's something
like
that
milk.
Like milk, and they're supposed to have it, and they don't. And a lot of times here's what a salesman or a store owner will say: well, we can order it. Well, in today's day and age, so can they.
Yeah.
They could probably get it faster than you possibly can, and they might be able to get a better deal. They can get free freight. They can get it within a few days, and so you can't do that no more. You have to stock inventory. You have to have stuff in there, and there's almost no thing as just in time.
Yeah,
I don't even know if that's true.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. And of course, Tim made the comment, which is an obvious statement: is you can't sell what you don't have.
Sure,
so. You need to kind of live a little. You got to live in the forecasts a little bit more. So,
Yeah.
but I don't know. Those are 5 things that through what Tim said and what you wrote down, man. I thought those were 5 things that really stuck out. Can you think of anything else that?
Yeah, I can think of a lot. I'll bring up a couple, and one of them is employees, and that's something that we like talking about.
Yeah, that's right.
I think earlier he talked about the ABC, and that's attitude, behaviorism, and competency. And that's when they're talking about people that want to be a music-around owner. There's 3 things that they look at. And a lot of times the attitude and the behavior of that individual is the most important thing. And the competency of it is something that they can train and teach. And something that applies to the employees is exactly that. Something that Tim brought up is one of the guys in one of the locations was talking about when they walk in the door, their attitude is 100%. They're excited.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it's us who diffuse that, and then we turn them into 98, 97, then it's 92. And that's something that we have to be mindful of, is the attitude of that employee is something that we have control over.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, we don't control all of that, but if we have an employee that's 100% on day one, don't let them dip down below that.
Yeah.
He also brought up about an employee saying, "Hey, come into my store."
Yeah,
and then
That's
the
right.
store owner, who's no longer a franchise a guy of MGR, said, "That's not his store. That's my store."
Yeah.
And man, it kind of bummed me out when I heard that, because how truthful it is to hear stuff like that. As if I was a store owner, I would take great pride in employees going, "Hey, this is our store."
Yeah.
They know what the truth is. They know who pays the bills, and they know what goes on. But if they have so much pride and they're so happy to be where you're at that they call it their store, let them call it their store.
Yeah. And he had mentioned about that. The question is not what do you do to motivate, but what do you do to demotivate them?
Absolutely.
Which is, I thought, was like, oh man, that's a great question, because we probably do stuff every day to demotivate the people around us because we're not treating them right, or we don't share the same vision. It's like, instead of giving that guy that vision that this is your store, man.
Yeah.
Sell what you can, do a great job, take care of people, and it just only benefits the owner, man. You now demotivate that person to go, well, screw this guy. Maybe I'll go find another job.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think we both, and we've talked about this, and man, we're about ready to let some things out of the bag. But how many times does that happen even to us, where things get said and you're like, really? Did you really have to say that?
Yeah.
Thankfully, our skin's a little bit thicker, and we kind of read between the lines. But it's partly you get kicked in the C.O. Jones a number of times, and you get a little gunshot. And then your employees, constantly motivating them, constantly doing stuff that makes them value what they do is hugely important. Now, let's talk about something, because I would not bring this up for any other reason. I think it's kind of fun, but as we're talking about it, motivating employees. So the other day, and you're the recipient of this motivation, and I don't even call it motivation. I just said, man, this is the right thing to do. As you know, we have a few. Or we have an individual that's out on knee surgery, and staffing is a little bit light, and we bring you and another salesman in and a few other people, and we talk about things, and we gift you with something, and it was a Slash Firebird.
Beautiful guitar.
It was
Thank
a cool
you so
guitar.
much.
Well, I mean, you earned it. You're worth it. We value you as an employee, so that's the least that we can do. But so the choice is two things. You could just take advantage of the hard work that you're putting in over the next 6 weeks while this guy's going to have surgery on his knee. Or we can kind of one-up it and do something even better, so you reflect back and go, man, that was cool. Now, that's not the why behind it, but that's a benefit of doing it. The why is because it was the right thing to do.
Yeah.
I feel like every opportunity and every chance that we possibly can take to make people's lives better and do things the right way. Sometimes it doesn't cost us anything. Sometimes it costs us a little bit, but the payoff is so worth it.
That's right.
That as a store owner, as a manager, as anybody in charge, that should be our go-to.
Yeah.
It's not, well, I'd like to do that, but if I don't do it, I'll save some money.
Yeah.
Shame on you for that thought. Shame on you, because that is not the way it should be done. It should be thinking, how can I benefit those people around me?
That's right.
And then with that benefit, and we're all benefiting each other, how powerful we become, how loyal we become to each other. How there's so many attributes that take on when we're constantly looking towards somebody else instead of looking towards ourselves.
Yeah, so. And it does. It creates that attitude that everybody wants.
Let me cut you off and tell everybody what your boys thought of it.
Oh, dude, they thought it was awesome. They thought it was awesome. How fun and then Audrey thought, she's like, it's pretty.
Yeah. Well, it was pretty. Audrey's right.
Yeah, she was sitting there going.
Another side of that is in this case it was you, so we could be open with this. You get to go home and show your sons something really cool.
Yeah, man.
And you get to share with your family something of value. So when they go, where's Daddy at? I want to hang out with Daddy. And Mom goes, he's at work right now helping provide for us. They think good things.
Yeah.
They think, well, they gave him a guitar and he likes his job. He works his butt off and does a good job, but he likes his job. Mm-hmm. They're nice to him. They think happy thoughts. And it's not like, leave me alone. I need 30 minutes and I don't want to talk to anybody because I had a crappy day at work and people are treating me like trash. It's not that.
Yeah.
And so many times we don't value the employees at the level that we need to because, man, truthfully, a lot of times they're the ones that's making us money.
Yeah. Tim even said that it's your lifeblood, which we've mentioned that many times before. It's the lifeblood of what you do. Music stores literally would not be in business or any business without loyal employees. Valued employees.
So in the case of some of this, a little bit of money towards something, you truthfully reap later on 100-fold.
Yeah.
And so why not go, hey, man, I'm going to do this because it's cool.
Absolutely.
Because it's fun.
Yeah.
And that's the culture that we try to create. Mm-hmm. And so getting off of that and onto employees, man, employees are so valuable. You got to take care of them.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've covered this in previous podcasts that we've done where, it's sometimes you just got to buy pizza for the employees. Sometimes you just got to have a little bit of sit down and get together. And every now and then you've got to do little things that just say, you know what, all I want to do, I'm only doing this is purely to say, Thank you, and I value you. Yeah. And so
it's so cheap.
I know
we got a bunch of, and I was going to say we have a bunch of tightwad owners out there, and there is truth in that. But let me stop and let me not joke around a bit and say we have a lot of really good owners out there, and those really good owners are looking, and it gets back to opportunity, is looking for opportunities to do stuff for their staff.
Yeah.
And so with that, I hope you're encouraged by it, because you're a great store owner, and part of you being a great store owner is you have great staff. So
yeah, absolutely.
Comes down to opportunity.
Yeah, man, I don't know if that was a great ending spot or if you've got something else, but that seemed like a great ending spot.
Well, I have a lot, and that's my problem is I've got
we need
3.5 pages here, and I just want, but we just can't. Mm-hmm. We talked about a lot of different things. Hopefully, the people that are listening will go back and listen to Tim's podcast if they haven't, that they would listen to what we're talking about. Not that we know everything, not that we know everything about their business, but that they will truthfully look at their strengths and their weaknesses, the opportunity. That's such a big thing for me. What's your opportunity in your marketplace? What can you do to better your situation? Because we need to concentrate on our strengths. We need to look at and go, what am I really good at? What am I really good at? Because a lot of times the things that we're really good at, we actually excel, even if in the market it's not as popular. Tim brought up lessons. Lessons appear, and I don't know how I feel about this. Not that he wasn't telling the truth, but that lessons were going backwards because you could go to YouTube, you can go all these places and see lessons. There's got to be truth in it, so I'm not minimizing what he's saying. But some people excel with lessons because they're really good at lessons. Yeah. They got a plan. They've got good teachers that are doing good lessons, and so that could be their strength. So you may have a store in an area that people say lessons is dying, where you're actually blossoming. So a lot of times it's our attitude, it's what we have going on. So go back to the SWOT, your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunity, and we didn't talk a whole lot about the threats, but that is something that we should take a look at on an individual level. and find out what's our threat in the market, man. What are people doing better than we are, and how can we turn that around? There's a lot of ways that we could educate ourselves and get better at doing things, and we could turn those threats around.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's good. And I think we need to get Scott Savage on here, talking about inventory in depth.
We'll have to have Tim back, because it appears to me, and I'm busting his chops right now, that Tim might get his feelings hurt. So he's a little sensitive.
If Scott
comes in without Tim, so I have to have them both in.
Well, all right. Well, maybe we could do one where they're both on at the same time.
Yeah,
and then we can say, Tim, glad we're here. You're here. We're going to talk to Scott.
Yeah, we're going to talk to Scott. Tim. We already talked to you. No, I'm just kidding. Tim did a great job. Tim does a good job. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to wind down. This is the last thing that I'm going to say. Is a big part of their success, in my opinion, is their sense of community. Yeah. I think a lot of times store owners, they feel like they're alone. Mm-hmm. With the MGRs, one thing that they've perfected was a sense of community. Yeah. They can always have somebody inspecting what they have going on. They have friends at other towns that they can communicate. So if you're out there and you don't have that community, you need to find it. That's right. You can go on LinkedIn, Facebook, NAM has it. There's a lot of places that you can go and be part. Something that we're going to do in the future is talk with the president of the Independent Music Store Owners. Yep. The IMSO organization, they talk a lot, and they deal a lot with small stores. They're a great place where there's a lot of great ideas. Yeah. So we'll have Alan in here hopefully pretty soon. Yeah. He's a talker, man. It might be 2 episodes. We might have to cut it in half.
It'll be a marathon session.
It might be.
But a lot of these things that, like Tim was talking about, is it provides accountability for people. Yes. And he was talking about the structure. Hey, man, listen. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. No. We've got a nice structure.
Just hold each other accountable.
Hold each other accountable within these guidelines, and you will be successful. Absolutely. We've proven that. Yeah. And I thought that was valuable information. So
huge stuff.
Anyways, man. Well, man, I'm telling you what, it was a great session. Yeah. Great. We had a lot to talk about. There's even more to talk about it.
There's a lot to talk about.
And of course, if anybody listening to this wants to weigh in, it's the music.
Outside of our family, if anybody listens, weigh in.
Yeah. I don't think my mom might email in, but if you want to email the musicretailshow@gmail.com and let us know what you think. If you have any insight, man, you can comment on the YouTube channel.
Yeah, and if anybody wants to know what CO Jones is. That's cojones.
Cojones. That's those drums, right? That you.
Close enough.
Anyways,
I think we better get off here.
Anyways, this is a great episode, and man, we'll see you at the next episode.
Right. Own a music store or sell guitars online? Need more inventory to stay competitive in today's market? MIRC is the nation's largest wholesaler of quality used guitars. Visit www.mircweb.com to become a dealer today.